All right, let's move on to this. This really caught my eye. A shocking segment here with Ai Weiwei. For people who don't know who he is, he's a Chinese dissident, an artist. I actually had the opportunity to talk to him a little bit on Clubhouse back in the day around how what he thought the most effective way in order to compel change within the Chinese regime would be whenever it comes to Uyghurs and the genocide that is happening there in Xinjiang. I know I just triggered many people in the comments section, but what I think is very important is Ai Weiwei, who lived through the Cultural Revolution, is giving a warning to American citizens in an interview on Firing Line with Margaret Hoover, where she seems a little surprised by his answer. Let's take a listen.
In your book, you're describing the directives of Mao Zedong during the Cultural Revolution that would be distributed publicly every night. And then you write, this is your quote, "They served a function similar to Donald Trump's late-night tweets while in office. They were the direct communication of a leader's thoughts to his devoted followers, enhancing the sanctity of his authority." So, do you see Donald Trump as an authoritarian?
I don't, if you're authoritarian, you have to have a system in supporting you. You cannot just be an authoritarian by yourself. But certainly in United States, with today's condition, you can easily have an authoritarian. In many ways, you're already in the authoritarian state. You just don't know it.
How so?
Many things happens today in US can be compared to Cultural Revolution in China.
Like what?
Like people trying to be unified in certain political correctness. That is very dangerous.
Very interesting that he would respond with that, Kyle. Ai Weiwei, by the way, is not like a conservative or something. I think people should realize that.
Yeah, it started with Trump, a question about Trump.
Yes, it was started with a question about Trump. And, I've heard him, like I said, I was in that Clubhouse room with him one time, and he has very astute kind of observations of the West and how exactly political correctness is a bit reminiscent to the Cultural Revolution in China. It was stunning to me that he saw that Margaret Hoover didn't know where it was going, kind of like what he was talking about.
It shocked me too at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I was like,
what?
I was like, where'd
that come from?
That is such a very prescient quote, but it struck me that to him, he would see some of what's happening in our, higher culture in terms of the attempts to shut down conversation. And as we've covered here on the show, that is not an exclusive phenomenon limited to the American left. And much of the conversation that we have right now, politics and, in terms of the culture wars about who can control, who gets to shut down whom, rather than let's just let everybody talk. But he seeing that and warning that on American national television, and I guess credit to PBS too for airing it. I thought it was a pretty stark moment.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of stuff to say about that. So to the political correctness point, if you focus on social media, this is something I've talked about quite a bit. And the idea that I find most interesting is regulating large social media platforms and treating them like public utilities so that you expand constitutional protections, you expand First Amendment free speech protections. And so with a system like that, yes, you still can't do direct threats of violence, which is illegal.
Right.
But basically outside of some very narrow and limited things, it's a true open platform. You can say what you want. It's the expansion of the public square. I do think that when we're talking about social media, that's the best answer, or at least the least bad answer that we have. Other people have good ideas too in terms of like, hey, maybe we should just break up a lot of these big social media companies. I'm more a fan of regulate them like public utilities. So that would help address that issue. But to his authoritarianism point, look, maybe I go a step further than him. I think we are surrounded by authoritarians. So when you look back at the Bush administration, torture, NSA spying on everybody, collecting everybody's metadata without a warrant, Guantanamo Bay. To his point about Trump, I think, of course, it's fair to call him an authoritarian. It's fair to call every post-World War II American president an authoritarian. It's not like all of a sudden under Trump we shut down Guantanamo Bay. It's not like a lot of those problems went away. He also continued all illegal wars overseas and drone bombing, and same thing under Joe Biden. But with Trump in particular, I don't know if you remember this, Saagar, but when he was president, he called for banning flag burning.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which, by the way, is not the conservative position. Justice Antonin Scalia, one of the most well-known conservative justices, said, look, I don't like it. I don't like what it represents. I don't like what it stands for. But of course it's protected speech. It's a sign of disapproval of what the government is doing. So he said, of course you have to allow that. Trump also said he wanted to crack down on the media and, quote, open up the libel laws.
Yes.
He very famously threatened to sue Bill Maher over a joke that compared him to an orangutan. So, I mean, listen, he is in many ways the ultimate snowflake, and we are in many ways surrounded by authoritarians. And another example of that is the anti-BDS laws that are on the books,
those are crazy.
Yeah, insane. Right. And there's anti-protest laws on the books in over 20 states. So yeah, I think we're surrounded by authoritarians on the left and the right, and authoritarians have been in power for decades. And so yeah, I think we're already there. That's not to say that we're equal to some horrendous dictatorship, but it is to say that we got a lot of problems that we need to fix, and he seems to understand that.
Yeah, he does understand that. I think it's more important what it is that if you read about the Cultural Revolution in China, you try to understand, you're like, how did this happen? Like, what exactly was it? And what it was a highly dedicated group of, these college students, like true believers in Mao. And then you also had the inability of both to speak out in the public square, of people to just say, hey, like, this is totally crazy. And next thing you know, when you don't do that, it spirals completely out of control within like 2 years. Within 2 or 3 years, all of Chinese society is totally transformed. You have people being beaten in the streets. You have high-standing officials who helped found the country. Their kids are being thrown out of windows and they're shipped off to some crazy province, even if they're not killed. I mean, it went totally, off the rails. Nobody is claiming that's what's happening here in the US. But what I think a large part of the current backlash to the dominant culture is to pointing to the feeling of, I just want to be left alone. This is actually very different from the social panics of the 1990s, when people were much more culturally conservative, like, let's just be honest. And there was, more of an attempt to like ban speech or ban a certain type, video games, of course, or to even to try and compel behavior, around gay issues, stuff like that. Now it is very much a social libertarianism of like, hey, just leave me alone, man. I see this very much in the critical race theory debate. It's very much like look, just you leave us alone. You're like, you keep your BS out of the schools, leave my kids be. I see it in the colleges in terms of the backlash against the compelling of speech. I see it also in BDS. I mean, look, no foreign country should come into our country and tell us what to think. No way, okay? That's not what we're about whatsoever. It applies to the Gulf and it applies to Israel just as much. That's part of the problem I see, that people in America, we have it baked into us from the frontier of just a distinct feeling of we need to be left alone, especially in the year 2021. So I think Ai Weiwei is at least speaking to that. I don't want to put words in his mouth or anything, but I've always found him a pretty interesting figure.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.